Welcome back to the FF Face-Off. I'm your host, Anthony Cervino. Follow me on Twitter at The Real NFL Guru. Follow the show at the FF Face-Off. We can be found at all the top social media and podcast platforms today. We're going to talk about my 5 players in Dynasty Fantasy Football that you have to go and buy right now. It's early in the offseason, but it's also prime Dynasty Fantasy Football season. Let's get into my 5 must-buy into players for your teams right now. Let's start at wide receiver. Let's start at Treylon Burks. And listen, Treylon Burks entering year 2, I believe he's going to be in a little bit of a better situation than he was last year. Now, last year, the Titans were an organization in flux. We know Ryan Tannehill battled injuries. We know Treylon Burks battled injuries. We know that moving off of A.J. Brown and bringing in Robert Woods didn't really work out too well. Well, going into year 2, I very much expect Treylon Burks to be the de facto number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. Robert Woods is not getting any younger, and I know Derrick Henry is aging, but he's still going to pose enough of a threat on the ground to open up the pass. It's a matter of, will it be Ryan Tannehill under center? Will they go and bring in another quarterback? Now, is it a little bit risky? Yes, because, hey, what if they move off of Tannehill and go with Malik Willis? I think that would be a disaster. I don't think it'll happen, but that is going to be in the back of fantasy managers' minds who do roster Treylon Burks, and that might make them want to move off of Burks, which means you could potentially get Treylon Burks is at a value because the talent's there. Maybe they don't believe in the quarterback. Maybe they don't believe in the offense, which means Treylon Burks is a really nice buy low prospect. Now, last season, when Burks did flash, he looked pretty damn good. Week 11 against Green Bay, 7 receptions on 8 targets, 111 yards, 18.1 fantasy points. He follows that up with a 17-point outing against a really good Cincinnati Bengals secondary, 4 of 6 for 70. 2 good games in weeks 11 of 12, and this is when Burks was coming off the injury, and then he's been kind of erratic since those games, and a lot of it has to do and correlates with the Ryan Tannehill injury. If you can go get Treylon Burks, go get him now while he's still a buy low dynasty player, because as soon as he gets going, or what if the Tennessee Titans, what if they go get Aaron Rodgers? Remember, there was a rumor that Rodgers and the Titans could have been a thing last offseason. What if that happens? All of a sudden, Treylon Burks' stock and his price will skyrocket. Let's go to a running back that I absolutely love, Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert's in a really, really, really good situation. Now, David Montgomery is headed into free agency. With all of the holes that the Chicago Bears have, I really don't see them retaining David Montgomery, which means Khalil Herbert is in prime position to take over the running back 1 spot. I don't see Chicago aggressively pursuing a running back in the open market or the draft. Like I said, they want to build a legitimate team around Justin Fields, which means you have a pretty damn good running back in Khalil Herbert. Why spend your capital? Why spend your assets to go get another running back when you have one right here who plays well with Fields in this offense? Last year, Khalil Herbert only plays in 13 games with a career high 9.1 PPR points per game. Career high, 129 attempts, 732 yards, a whopping 5.7 yards per carry, 5 total touchdowns. Now, Khalil Herbert, 5th in true yards per carry with 5.2 and an actual 5.7 yards per carry. 7th amongst running backs in yards per touch with 5.7. 7th amongst running backs with a 39.1% juke rate. He's pretty elusive when he has a football. 22nd in evaded tackles, 4.2 of them per game. I really like Khalil Herbert, and this is a really good one. He was the 9th best running back in terms of yards created per touch. He's pretty damn elusive, like I just just said, with the football in his hands, and he's actually a pretty good run blocker. We know that running backs who can block, they will get on the field, especially on third downs and passing situations. Khalil Herbert had the 21st best run blocking rating in the NFL amongst running backs last year. Khalil Herbert's a legitimate running back. He's on an offense that ran the ball 32.5 plays per game. They were second in team run plays per game at a 1.98 pace. You have Justin Fields, the enemy defense needs to pay attention to, which takes the attention of Khalil Herbert, and all of a sudden, Khalil Herbert could be popping for a career-high season once again next year, only I do see this kid really popping off if he is indeed Chicago's starter. Go get your hands on Khalil Herbert, absolutely positively. Right now, let's go to a quarterback I love, and I know it's Dynasty. I know he's not a young guy, but Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is going to be entering 2023 as the Week 1 starter for the Cleveland Browns. There is no more suspension hanging over his head. He already got his feet wet back into the NFL. And I know Deshaun Watson had a little bit of a rocky start to his tenure with the Browns. Of course, he didn't play for football in a very, very long time. He had all those legal proceedings hanging over his head. That is no more. Deshaun Watson is going to now be able to pay attention to playing football. Shocker, right? That's what he should have been doing from the first place. Now, if we look at Deshaun Watson last season, like I said, from weeks 13 really through week 16, those 4 games, it was really erratic. They won a couple of them, but in terms of Deshaun Watson, a quarterback, he really didn't look great. But in fantasy, if you look at him in week 17 and 18 against Washington and Pittsburgh, had his 2 best fantasy outings of the year. He was a QB 8 in week 17 to QB 6. In week 18, he threw for 5 total touchdowns in that 2-game period. He only threw for 2 total touchdowns in the first 4 games coming back. He also averaged 9.4 yards per attempt against Washington in week 17, 7.9 yards per attempt against Pittsburgh in week 18. In the 4 games previous, he averaged fewer than 6.6 yards per attempt. Listen, Deshaun Watson was getting better as he got more acclimated back into the NFL and with his weapons in Cleveland. And folks, I absolutely love what he has to work with the Cleveland Browns. When you look at Peoples-Jones and Cooper and Njoku, a couple of really nice running backs, good offensive line. I like Stefanski as an offensive guy. Deshaun Watson might go back to his old ways, not talking about off the field, but his old ways, the quarterback that he was with the Houston Texans. Remember, he was a top 5 or better fantasy quarterback before all the outside stuff came into play. I think Deshaun Watson's going to come at an immense value, and go get him while people still remember the Deshaun Watson of the end of last season, because I believe we're going to get the Deshaun Watson from a couple of years ago right out the gate in week 1 of the 2023 NFL campaign. Let's go to my last 2 players. One of which Jerry Jeudy. And let me be honest with you folks, and if you listen to my show, I'm not a Jerry Jeudy guy. I'm not a Broncos guy. I punted, I faded, you name it. I did it to the Broncos. I did everything but roster a Denver Bronco not named Tim Patrick. And I know Tim Patrick didn't get hurt, but I believe Tim Patrick was the best wide receiver going to last season for the Denver Broncos. Didn't really buy into Jeudy, didn't buy into Sutton, certainly didn't buy into Russ or Hackett. But if there was anybody who sold me, it was Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy, career high, 13.6 PPR points per game. Good for the wide receiver 19. He played in 15 games at 100 targets, 67 for 972 and 6 touchdowns, 14.5 yards per catch. Here's the interesting thing with Jerry Jeudy, right? 9th in terms of yards per target, 21st in yards per team pass attempt, 20th in yards per reception. This is a big play guy who made it happen. And he made it happen despite Russell Wilson, because we know Russell Wilson didn't really have a great year. We'll get into that in a second. One more note on Jerry Jeudy. He was 12th in the NFL in deep targets with 24. He's a big play threat. He showcased it last year, and I think we are just beginning to see the best of Jerry Jeudy in the NFL. In terms of big weeks. He was a wide receiver 12 week 1, wide receiver 20 in week 4, hit a couple wide receiver 2 weeks in week 7 and 8, dealt with a little bit of an injury, and then he came out to end the season as and we're talking about from week 13 to week 18, he had at least 10 PPR points per game. But if we go into week 14 to week 18, here's how we finished in fantasy. Wide receiver 1, 24, 14, 27, and then the wide receiver 3, a really nice finish for Jerry Jeudy. But the finish wasn't only good for Jerry Jeudy. Russell Wilson down the stretch, and this is after they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett. Listen, pretty good offensive coordinator, joke of a head coach. He needed to go. But Russell Wilson at the end of the year, I'm not a Russell Wilson guy, was pretty impressive for fantasy football. And now you add Sean Payton to the mix. I don't know if we're ever going to get that old Russell Wilson from Seattle again, but I do think Sean Payton is going to repair Russ enough to allow him to cook a little bit, and really enough to maybe we see a big boom breakout year from Jerry Jeudy. I can't believe I'm saying that because I never bought into this guy, but I'm buying into Jerry Jeudy now. Go get your hands on him. I'm going to close with one more wide receiver. His name is Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley, like Deshaun Watson, dealt with a lot of off-the-field junk. If you remember, back in 2021, he steps away from the team, had a little bit of a mental health breakdown. Last year suspended for the duration of the campaign because of the gambling issue. At the trade deadline, traded to my Jacksonville Jaguars, and I absolutely love it for Jerry Jeudy. Why? Because, not taking anything away from Matt Ryan, but I believe Trevor Lawrence is going to be the best quarterback Calvin Ridley will ever play with. And if we go back to the last time we saw Calvin Ridley healthy and productive, go back to 2020, played in 15 games, had 143 targets, 90 receptions, 1,374 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's the wide receiver 4 that year in fantasy points per game with 18.8. He was the wide receiver 1. We talk about deep threat. The wide receiver 1 in air yards with 2,063. He was the wide receiver 1 in deep targets with 40. The wide receiver 2 in red zone targets with 22. So not only did Calvin Ridley flash as a deep threat, he also flashed in the red zone. He's an all-around complete wide receiver 1. You're not going to be able to get guys like this at a pseudo discount. And I say pseudo discount because I do believe you can get Ridley at a discount compared to other guys that you can compare to Ridley. Why? Because he has not played football in a long time. I love the landing spot with Jacksonville. Just look what Christian Kirk and Ingram and Zay Jones, all 3 of them had career years, and this is an offense. This is a quarterback that is on the upswing. Calvin Ridley, if you're looking to buy a wide receiver 1, you don't want to pay a premium that you will for, let's say, a Jefferson or an A.J. Brown or a C.D. Lamb. Calvin Ridley is going to be just a little bit cheaper, and I believe he has just as much upside as those other dudes I just mentioned. Guys, this was great. This was a great episode on players to buy now in your Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues. We're going to be dropping content like this all the time, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and subscribe wherever you get podcasts because it's going there too in audio format. I'm Anthony Cervino. This is the FF Face-Off. Hit the notification icon because when I go live, I answer all of your questions. Until then, we'll see you later.